Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Tonight's Gemara, at least the first chunk of it, is heavy on the Mara Makomo side. How do we know the Isurim of Mishkav Zachar and Mishkav Behema, of homosexuality and bestiality? Not only the onshin of what the punishments are, but as well in regards to the Azhara. We know fundamentally in Shas that in order for a halacha to be properly structured in the Mara Makomos, you need both an onesh and an azhara. Let's jump into the Mishnah. Habala zachor, if a man were to violate another man, violates the wrong word, cohabit with another man, ve'al habehema, or with an animal, or ve'haisha hamevias habehema, or a woman brings a male animal to her. So the halacha is beskila, all of them are chayiv skila. Imadam chata behema machata. But what's with the animal? Why are we killing the animal, Beskila? We killed a person. The animals are none the wiser. They're not, they have no Bechira. Says the Gemara, two different possible answers. 6, 7 lines from the bottom of Nun Dalam and Aleph. Says the Gemara, Adam takala al yada, because through this animal, a stumbling block arose for this person. Lefichach amar akasav tisakel. That's why the animal needs to be killed, because it was a takala. It caused, or was a part, didn't cause, but it was a part of the takala of. This svara is a very dangerous svara. I'm saying just because something is a part of your failure, we should therefore burn it. I don't know. Okay, that needs reshowing.
Famously, well, people today. No, but famously, they say that it shouldn't be a design to the person.
Yeah.
That's the next one.
Yeah.
You got to stop doing that, David. Your muscles are going to be popping out of your shirt soon with all the flexing. It's going to be unbelievable. Davaracher shlote behema overis b'shuk v'yomru zohi sheniskal ploni al yada. That famously, I love that. Famously, in this Mishnah that I learned 7.5 years ago. So the Gemara gives two svars. One is that the animal was a takala, and the other is that nebach, the person's dead and the animal's walking around. It just doesn't. The optics aren't good. Those are my words, not to be shown him, but there's certainly a shvera matzav to see the animal alive and the person dead. You and I can't tell the difference between one cow and the next, but in an agricultural space, when you're a shepherd, you know every animal. You just do. You know your kids apart. I don't know your kids apart. I couldn't tell. I don't know what your kids' names are.
They have different faces. A cow is all the same.
They also have different faces. You just can't tell. My neighbors have twins. The only difference between them is a freckle on the nose. Otherwise, I would have no clue. And in fact, until Panama, I didn't know. And we've been neighbors for a long time. I just say, hey, I don't know. I push at mamish. I didn't know their names until this 2 weeks ago. Says the Gemara, opening up at the bottom of the page on Nun Dalam and Aleph. Zachar Minola. How fundamentally do we know about the Isser of Mishkav Zachar? The Tana Rabbanon. Let's look at the whole pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'isha sher yishkav es Zachar mishkavei isha." And a man that lies with another man as he would with a woman, toeva. This is an abomination. Asu shnehem. They both did an abomination. Mos yumasu dmehem bam. Both of them need to die, and dmehem bam. Now, if we've been paying attention the last couple of days, dmehem bam is code word for skila, as we'll soon see in the Gemara. Let's parse this pasuk up. Ish prat lekatan. If the violator is a katan, so then he doesn't get killed. He's a katan. Katanim are not bar onshin. Asher yishkav es zachar bein gadol bein katan. So if the perpetrator violates either a katan or a gadol, we don't care. I mean, we care. We don't distinguish between who he cohabited with. If he's a gadol, it doesn't matter who he cohabited with. He's still going to be chayiv skila. Mishkavei isha, says the Gemara. This pasuk indicates nothing about mishkav zachar, but rather magilacha akasuv sheshnei mishkavos beisha. That there's two ways to cohabit with a woman. This is not just teaching us basic information. It's also teaching us about the parameters of cohabiting with a woman in Isser, that there could be separate Isser, Mishkav. You have Ben Kedarka, Ben Shelo Kedarka. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, fascinatingly, Hareza Balu Lamed, Benim Solamad. We thought Mishkavei Isha was coming to teach us halacha. It turns out we learned something else. We learned something totally different. We learned something about an isha. The pasuk continues, Mos yumasu b'skila. Ata omer b'skila. How do you know that really it's skila? All the Torah says is Mos yumasu. So says the Gemara, like we've learned over the last couple of days. Ne'amar kan d'me'en bam, v'ne'amar ba'ovi yidoni d'me'en bam. We know over here by Mishkav Zachar that the pasuk says d'me'en bam, and we know by Ovi Yidoni it says d'me'en bam alahalan b'skila kan b'skila. So ain't safek that if there's a Mishkav Zachar nick and he's violated and he slept with another man and we caught him, halacha l'maisa is chayiv skila. Says the Gemara on the top of Nun Dalet Beis. Really, I've prepared until the bottom, almost till the bottom of Nun Hey in the Beis. I don't know how far we'll get. This Gemara on this page is pretty long. Let's see what we can do. Nun Dalet Beis, the Gemara says on the top, Onesh Shamanu, thank you very much. We know that there's Skila Azhar Minai, but where's the Azhara as a precursor to the Onesh? We can't execute someone without having both Onesh and Azhara. We need a warning. It says the Gemara Talmud lo sishkav mishkeve isha to'evahi. This is another pasuk. It's different and it sounds quite similar. Why do we have both? Well, one's for Onesh and one, like we have over here, is for an Azhara. It says the Gemara as follows. The Gemara says Lamadnu Azhara l'shochev. I know that there's an Azhara for the man who does the Maisa. Azhara l'nishkav minayin. But where is the Azhara for the recipient of the Mishkavei Isha? Of the Mishkav Zachar. He's passive. So Zag the Gemara, Tamalomar lo yeh kadesh mibnei Yisrael v'omer v'gam kodesh yeh ba'aretz asu k'chol to'evos hagoyim asher horish v'gomer divrei Bishmal. Rabbi Shmuel holds that the Azhara for a Nishkav is these psukim, these two psukim. Typically, we would expect the Gemara to say Mai ve'omer. The Gemara does not say that over here. All that is Rabbi Shmuel, that he learns the Azhara for the Nishkav from these two psukim. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Eino Tzarech. He says, no, you don't need those psukim to learn about Mishkavei, about the Azhara for the Nishkav, because Harei Omer Ves Zachar, the pasuk says Ves Zachar Lo Sishkav. A man you should not lay with, Mishkavei Isha. Karibe Lo Sishachev. Not that you shouldn't just lay with, but you shouldn't be laid with, meaning shochev and nishkav, not just the person who did the maisa, but the recipient of the maisa. So therefore, the azhara is included in the same word of lo sishkav, which could also be read as lo sishochev. So far, what we've learned is a little bit about the parameters of mishkav zachar. We've learned that the onesh is skila. We've learned psukim that teach us about the azhara. So far the sugya is very clean. The Gemara says, Behema minalan. Teach me a little bit about behema, about the isser of cohabiting with an animal. The Tanu Rabbanan. Let's read the full pasuk inside. Be'isha asher yitain shechovto bivhema. If a man gives his laying down with the animal, mos yumas, he should die. Ve'es habehema taharogu, the animal should die too. Ish prat lekatan. That if a katan violates the isser of bestiality, he will not be put to death, because as mentioned, a katan is not a bar onshin. The pasuk continues, Asher yitain shchavto b'vehema ben gdola ben ktana. If the man who perpetrates this isser is a gadol, we don't care about the age of the animal. Mos yumas beskila. How do we know that it's beskila? Ata omer beskila ve'enu ala ba'achas mikol nisa samurs b'torah. How do you know that the isser of lishkavim behema, that the onesh, is going to be an onesh of skila? Perhaps it's different. So Zag the Gemara, a quarter of the way down on Nun Dalet Amud Beis, Ne'amar kan ta'arogu. In our pasuk, it states ta'arogu at the end of the pasuk that the behema is ta'arogu. Ne'amar lahalan ki harog tehargenu lahalan b'skila afkan b'skila. That we have another pasuk as well. That pasuk reads a little differently. Ki harog tehargenu. And over there, that's a pasuk in Dvarim. And there we would say that just like in Dvarim, there's skila with the word tahargenu, so too in our case, by Mishkav Zachar, it says taharogu, that's also skila. And following a similar pattern, let's remember that we learned about Mishkav Zachar, we learned about the Onesh and the Azhara. Now by Behema, we learned about the Onesh. What are we going to do now? We're going to ask about the Azhara. So says the Gemara, Lamadnu, Lamadnu onesh l'shochev. Oh, sorry, I foreshadowed a little bit. We learned about the onesh for the shochev. Onesh l'nishkav minolan. How do we know what the punishment is for the recipient of the one who received the tashmish hamita? Talmud lomar kol shochevim behema mos yumas. This is an extra extraneous pasuk that already taught us the same din. And if this pasuk is not needed for the shochev, for the perpetrator of the iser, the one who performed the iser, then we would give over this pasuk as the onesh to extend the onesh of skila to the recipient of the tashmish hamita. Says the Gemara, "Lamadnu onesh ben l'shochev ben l'nishkav." Thank you very much. You've given me mara makomos that indicate skila for both the shochev and the nishkav. However, as hara minayin, how do we know that when it comes to a behema by a shochev and by a nishkav, a shochev is the one who perpetrates the isser with an animal, and the nishkav is the one on whom the animal perpetrated the isser? What's the azhara? A third of the way down on nun daled base, it says the Gemara, Tamalomar v'chol behema lo sitein shchavtecha l'tamava. That seemingly is an extra pasuk from which we can learn about the azhara for behema, for cohabiting with a behema. So says the Gemara, Lamadnu azhara l'shochev. Thank you very much. You taught me about the azhara for the shochev, for the man who cohabits with an animal, who does the maisa. L'nishkav minayin. How do we know about an animal, about the person that an animal violated, that an animal cohabited with? So there, how do we know? Very similar as before, that this is considered to be the azhara. Rabbi Akiva Omer Eino Tzarach Rehu Omer Lo Sitein Shchavtecha Lo Sitein Shechivasecha. Also a play on words. Rabbi Akiva is ready to take some poetic license and play with the vowels on the words. Instead of Shechavtecha Shechivasecha, Shechavtecha is talking about the shochev. The Shechivasecha is talking about the man who was the nishkab. So that's how we learn that there is an azhara machlokes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. We're halfway down, 3 lines before the wide lines. What if multiple things happened? If a man was violating another man, or again, cohabiting with another man, behavi alav zachar, and there's another man who then violates him. According to Rabbi Shmuel, you're chayiv 2. Chada milo sishkav, chada milo yeh kadesh chada milo yeh kadesh. Put the period in the wrong place. But l'divrei Rabbi Akiva eino chayiv ela achas. But according to Rabbi Akiva, we can learn everything from the same word. What's that? Lo sishkav, lo sishochev chadahi. That whether or not you are the whether or not there's one person or two, it doesn't matter, because that man was in one episode where he was both the shochev and the nishkav. Because he's chadahi, because he's one individual, and it's all done behelamachas, so then halacha is that he's going to be chayav 1. Abala behema, behevi behema alav. These are all talking about cases of shogeg. Again, what is the mitzias of sleeping with an animal b'shogeg? I just don't know. I have no idea, but that's what the Gemara is dealing with. So a man is bala behema, he's the shochev, he's cohabiting with an animal, behevi behema alav, and in the same ha'elam, in the same lapse of judgment, in the same shogeg, an animal violates him. Rabbi Bala, Rabbi Shmuel, it depends. According to Rabbi Shmuel, chayiv shtayim chad milo sitein shchavtecha v'chad milo yakadesh. He says there's 2 isurim. But the Rabbi Akiva eno chayiv alachas shchavtecha v'shchivasecha, that you can be both the shochev and the nishkav. And because that's all learned from the same word, chada, all of that is considered to be chada. That's all talking about one person. Abaye Omar, he looks at this and says, well, actually, I disagree. He says, I know that we just quoted 2 psukim for Rabbi Shmuel, that you're going to be chayiv 2 in this case, where a man was both the shochev and the nishkav with an animal. Why would Rabbi Shmuel here actually say 1 according to Abai? Says the Gemara that when the pasuk says lo yeh kadesh, Rabbi Shmuel tried to apply it over here as the second isser of being the shochev to an animal. Says the Gemara, you can't do that. This pasuk only applies to a gever, to a man. The pasuk of lo yeh kadesh begavri. Lo yeh kadesh means to not be a harlot, to not be someone who prostitutes themselves. That's not a din by an animal. That's a din by a person. So Rabbi Shmuel took some latitude to say that second Isser was talking about a behema. It's not talking about a behema. Elo the Rabbi Shmuel, according to him, now that this pasuk is out, as her lanishka minale, the pasuk that we just said no longer applies by an animal. That was the shita that we just saw in the name of Abaye. If that's true, then we need another marimakam for the azhar for the nishkab. So azhar the nishkab minale, who says Gemara nafkalei mikol shocheh b'behema mosimas, and imeno inyan l'shocheh, because we don't need the azhara for the shocheh, because we already have a pasuk that's an azhara for a shocheh. For the person who perpetrates the Isser, Tneu Inyan Lanishkab, to the man who was the Isser was perpetrated upon. And the Torah itself speaks about the Nishkab in the language of Shochev. How so? 2/3 of the way down, 3/4 of the way down, 8 lines into the wide lines. Mashochev Onash He's here, just like the man who perpetrates the Isser of cohabiting with an animal, both has an Onesh and an Azhara. Af nishkav onash v'he's here. Hanir bela zachar v'hanir bela behema. A person who has these two isurim stacked together, they're different isurim. So says the Gemara, what happens if he was nirba to both? He wasn't the roveya, he was the nirba, so he was victimized in both cases. These are different isurim. So here, Rabbi Akiva is the one who says there's two isurim. The Divrei Rabbi Shmuel, Eino chai b'lachas, idi b'idi lo yeh kodeshu. Because Rabbi Shmuel holds that the same pasuk applies both to the world of behema and to the world of a person. And that's why the Gemara says, v'hanir b'lezachar, v'hanir b'lebehema, there's only going to be one isser, according to Rabbi Shmuel. That's very mechudash. Because at the end of the day, you are violating two things. One is being nearby by a person, one's being nearby by an animal. Why aren't they separate? So it's all behalam echad, and they're all under the gather of lo yeh kadesh. Abaye Amar afilu divrei Rabbi Shmuel nami chayv shtaim. He says no. Rabbi Shmuel would even agree that there's two in the case of nearby lebehema, nearby le'adam. Was that the language? Nearby le'zachar, nearby lebehema. Says the Gemara. Why is it that Rabbi Shmuel would even agree that there are two isurim here? Dechsi kol shocheh b'behema mos yumas. Because he says there's another pasuk that's available of anyone who lies with a behema, they're going to die. And that pasuk is extraneous as it relates to the shochev. We already know about the shochev, about the perpetrator of the isser of bestiality. And the Gemara says, Imenu inyan l'shochev, tneu inyan l'nishkav, it's an extra pasuk. And because we already learned the azhara by shochev, we need to apply it to this case as well. We also know that the shochev and the nishkav are equivalent. How so? 8 lines from the bottom. Shochev onash v'hizer af nishkav onash v'hizer. Now we found our marimakom that teaches us an azhara, not an azhara, that teaches us the number of yisurim, which even according to Rabbi Shmuel is going to be 2 in a case of nirba l'zachar, nirba l'behema. Ava haba l'zachar v'hevi zachar alav. If a man was perpetrating and then he became perpetrated, or habala behema vehevi behema alav, or if a man was perpetrating an animal and then he became violated by an animal, ben Rabbi Abo ben Labai, Rabbi Shmuel chayv shalosh, Rabbi Akiva chayv shtaim. There we add in yet another set of isurim, and it's a machlokas. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara doesn't articulate what the reason for 3 and 2 is. Ayin sham and the Rishonim, but so says the Gemara. Hanu Rabbanan, toward the very end of Nun Dalet Amud Beis, just a handful of lines before the bottom of the page. Zachor lo asubo katan kigadol. Behema asuba katana kigdola. A little cryptic. The Gemara says that when it comes to Mishkav Zachar, so there we differentiate between a katan and a gadol. But a behema, a katan and a gadol are the same. And this is very difficult to understand. So let's see if we can figure it out. My lo asu bo katan kigadol. What did it mean in regards to 2 men being together, that a katan is different than a gadol? Amara lo asu bias pachos mi ben tesha shonim kiven tesha shonim. If a boy performs the act of homosexuality below the age of 9, that's not a child whose bia is valuable. It's not even valid in halacha. He's also not a bar onshin, but forget onshin. It's not tashmish amita, even though the act looks like tashmish amita. And even if it were to be, I mean, he's usually prepubescent at that age, but even if he was mazriya, it doesn't matter. His tashmish, the act of the intercourse, is itself a zero. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a woman. We're talking about a girl, I should say. That the bia of a girl who's pachos mi ben shalosh, she's less than 3 years old, where her basulim will regrow. There, we're not so concerned. But it's different than kiven shalosh shanim. And b'ma'kim miflagei, what is this argument about? Says the Gemara. Rav, who is of the opinion that we're talking about the shochev, the boy. Rav Savar called the Ise b'shochev Ise b'nishkav. Whatever the halacha is by the shochev applies to the nishkav. But whatever doesn't apply by the shochev doesn't apply by the nishkav. Ushmol Savar mishkevei isha ksiv. He says we're talking about mishkevei isha. We're talking about actions that apply to females, and a girl is a girl. So therefore, it has to be talking about the girl. Well, we're mechalik between a girl who's 3 and a girl who's not 3, that under 3, if a man were to violate that, if there was a behema there, so then that wouldn't be problematic. It's usher, but it wouldn't be anything for the girl because it's not tash m'shamitza. The basilim will grow back.
So she was still allowed to come?
Right, correct. I mean, I presume. I'm not a posek. I don't think the tash m'shamitza is the machriya. It's the fact that she's a be'ula, but she's not a be'ula because her basilim will grow back. She's still a basula. It's probably, is that correct in what I'm saying? Intercourse occurred, but she has no basulim. So if she's pachos migimel shanim, you're right that she is in our modern parlance.
We assume it grows back.
That's the assumption of the Gemara. But the question is, do we define basula by never having had the ma'aseh tashmish, or do we define basula? I believe the latter is the case. Or do we define basula as having a basulim? Makes sense.
What's called a mukaseitz, right?
You could have a
or some sort of.
That's true, but a mukaseitz is not usher to a.
I don't know.
I can't imagine that it's just about the ma'aseh. I think it's more about the basulim. But I mean, I'm aretz.
But doesn't it say with respect to that about snus?
Now what?
Well, the reason why a non what's it called? A non-virgin is not allowed to a kohen is because of znus.
Pasuk says that he has to marry Basulam.
It doesn't say something we just talked about. It said that kiseichel is no.
No, that's about his daughter. That's talking about his daughter who's a kiseichel is no. The pasuk says by a kohen's daughter that she gets sreifa.
Right.
Isha zonova chalala lo yikach.
Right. So how could somebody under 3 be even? Who Sulah? It could be who Isha be Sulah Yikach.
Right. I don't know, but I my hunch is that we don't view the ma'aseh of intercourse itself as the psul, but because it's not znus. Actually, she's a 3-year-old, but a 2-year-old. But I believe, again, I could be wrong, but I believe that we define a basula as it relates to a kohen, based on whether or not there's a basulim. Could be wrong. Don't know. Okay. Tanya Kavase de Rav, there's a brisa that supports the shita of Rav Zachar. When it comes to Mishkav Zachar, Ben Tesha Shana V'Yom Echad, look at that. It's already talking about Rav Shita. Rav said that when the brisa said Lo Asu Bo Katan, Kigadol, that is talking about the age of the boy, that the perpetrator who is a boy, if he violates prior to the age of 9, that's not called tashmish amita. And if he violates after the age of 9, by the way, the standards have nothing to do with the anatomy. They have nothing to do with puberty. It's just a line in the sand of age. And we'll see soon a very wild case that has nothing to do with the aver at all. Just, well, let's get there. So it says the brisa, like Rav, on the very bottom line of Nandal Amid Beis, says the Gemara, Zachar ben Tesha Shanim B'Yom Echad, Abal Abehema, Ben Kedarka, Ben Shelo Kedarka, Veishim Mevias Abehema Aleha, and a woman as well. who brings an animal onto her, ben kedarka, ben shelo kedarka, either way, that they attach that the animal sleeps with them and then chayiv. So all of that is a raya for Rav, seemingly we hold like Rav. Darash Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda be'isha shnei mishkavos. When it comes to a woman, there's two options for mishkavos. There could be ben kedarka and shelo kedarka. Ubevehema, when we talked about an animal, mishkav echad, we're only talking about one opportunity for the Yitzhak. Says the Gemara, Maskif Lora Papa Adira, but we should have said Isha by a woman, de orcha hi a mishkav mechayev. We would have said that by a woman, where the average woman, says the Gemara, is that's typical. It's orcha hi, that a woman will have tashma shamita stam, not even just for having children, but just stam. She'll have tashma shamita for hana. Amida machrina lo mechayev. But behema delav orchahi lechayev Allah al kol nekev v'nekev. But the other animals don't have tashma shamita for any other reason. A behema is not lav orcha. Behemas don't have tashma shamita just for hana. Yeah, I don't know anything about animals. I'm just reading the Gemara like you are. But a behema doesn't have tashma shamita for hana. Behemas only have tashma shamita when they're in heat, when they're in mating season. So maybe we should have said it's different, and therefore by a behema, because it's lav orcha lechayev Allah al kol nekev v'nekev, and we shouldn't have said by the behema that by the behema it's mishkav echad, only one type of mishkav. So the Gemara says no answer to that. Tanya, let's see what the Brisa says. Zachar ben tesha shanim v'yom echad haba ala behema ben kedarka ben shelo kedarka. The Brisa says that when it comes to Mishkav Zachar, yet another brisa like Rav, that when we look at the boy's age of 9 when he's the perpetrator, no distinction between Kedarka and Shelo Kedarka. And a woman who brings upon herself an animal for Tashma Shamita ben Kedarka ben Shelo Kedarka Chad. Okay. Let's drill down when it comes to this Isser of Mishkav Zachar as to what the parameters are. We're familiar with this idea from Mishkavei Isha that there's an Isser called Ha'ara. Ha'ara is the beginning of penetration and intercourse. A discussion, does it just mean the Nishika of the Aver to the Makom HaToref, or the Knisa of the Atara to the Makom HaToref? Is it just the alignment with minimal skin contact? Or are we talking about actual penetration of some degree that is then called Ha'ara? That's then considered to be Tashma Shamita as it relates to the Isser of Mishkav Zachar. That's the Gemara's question. What if there's just Ha'ara? Would that then be the Isser of Mishkav Zachar, yes or no? Ha'ara b'Zachar, of course, Mishkavei Isha ksibben. Pasuk state in Chumash that is talking about Mishkavei Isha. That's fundamentally what the Isser is talking about. The Pasuk says, Ve'ez Zachar lo sishkav Mishkavei Isha. A man is not allowed to sleep with another man as he would with a woman. And what is the standard by a woman? Ha'ara, whatever that means. Let's assume it's partial penetration. So there we should then say that the same exact thing should be true by Mishkav Zachar. The Gemara accepts this as truth. That when it comes to Mishkav Zachar, even Ha'ara is going to be the threshold of the Isser, and he'd be chayiv skila for that. So the Gemara says that can't be Ravina's question. That's pashut, because since the pasuk says Mishkavei Isha, that's ABCs. Question is, do we apply the standards by Mishkav Zachar and Mishkavei Isha of Ha'ara to the world of Behema? Meaning, what's the threshold at which point we say one is chayiv skila for bestiality? Amar le. Im eno inyan laha'ara tichsi be'achos aviv ve'achos imo. Sorry, I skipped something here. Yeah. Ela ha'me'ara be'hema amar le. Im eno inyan amar le. Im eno inyan laha'ara. This has nothing to do with ha'ara. There's an extra pasuk. Tichsiv gabe. Achos avi ve'achos imo delot tzricha. We don't need that pasuk. Iskash laha'ara denida snehu inyan laha'ara debehema. We have the extra pasuk of achos avi ve'achos imo, and therefore we apply from the world of Mishkavei Isha to the world of Mishkavei Behema. That just like by Mishkavei Isha, the ha'ara is considered to be the threshold for the Isser. So too when it comes to mishkavei behema, that's also the threshold of the Isser. Michti, the Gemara says, behema mechayve misos bezdin. We know that a behema is chayiv misos bezdin. Lama li dechsiv ha'ara dida gabe chayiv krisus. Why do we even need to talk about ha'ara in regards to chayiv krisus? Lichtave, we should not have written it by chayiv krisus. We should have written it gabe chayiv misos bezdin in regards to the misa of bezdin, not by krisus. It would have made sense to learn it from a better source instead of learning it from Chayve Krisus. You learned it from Achos Avi V'Achos Imo, which is Nisr Kars. Learn it from another case. Learn it from a case that's similar. It says the Gemara, Hol Kule Kra Drasha Hudasi, since the whole pasuk is being used for drasha, Ksivanami Milsa de Drasha. Because the way we learn it out in the psukim by Chayve Krisus is through a drasha, so that is how we should learn it out over here. The Gemara asks a question that is not one that we would have expected. It says the Gemara, the logistics here, the Gemara is going to discuss. If a person manages to have Mishkav Zachar with himself, it's an unbelievable zach. The Gemara doesn't, we're going to discuss the logistics in a moment. Amar le kabasta, and you're wasting our time with a ridiculous question. Amar Ravashi, ma'iti boilach. What kind of question are you asking? Bikoshi, if there is a koshi, if there is an erection, lo mishkachas lo. The anatomy is not flexible like that. If there's a kishui, so then it's not oriented in such a way where one can arrange for there to be mishkav zachar ma'isa with himself. Ki mishkachas lo. The only case could be when the anatomy is flaccid. B'mishamesh meis, where a person violates themselves with their own aver tashmish, but it has to be where there's no kishui. It has to be where the aver is long enough to access shelo kedarka, but there's no kishui. Unbelievable what the Gemara talks about. So the Gemara says, and now we'll understand why this Gemara was brought. Such an important nekuda. Leman de Omar Meshamesh Meis Be'arayos Potter Hacha Potter. Wow. The Gemara says that when there's Tashmish Hamita, but it's not with a kishui, you're Potter from the Isra Arayos. Who knew? You look so perplexed. I don't.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. Of course. What did you say?
Is it a Gemara in your bums? I don't remember this at all.
No,
I blacked out all of your bums.
Correct. That's what I said. I can get away with one tonight.
Yeah. So the Gemara, this is interesting though. Like we know, for example, the halachas, the poskim speak about this. Let's say that a couple is in the middle of the mitzvah tashmish hamita. While they're together, she says, "I know that I just became a nida." What do you do? So the poskim say you're yotze be'ever meis. The male stays perfectly still until the kishui subsides, until the erection dissipates, and only then can he exit the body. Why? It's very simple. If there's intercourse with a kishui and there's hana, that's the isra of sleeping with a nida. But if there is intercourse without a kishui, without an erection, pater. So that's why the poskim say, and our women and our culture are not sensitive to the moment that they become a nida. Back in the day, it seemed to have been the case that a hargasha, some type of feeling that a woman could get, that she knew she became a nida. So in the middle of intercourse, the husband would have to wait until the kishui dissipates and then he can exit the body, because for there to be hana, which basically means movement with a kishui during intercourse, is asur. So the halacha is so dak, it's so sensitive. So what we learn from this absolutely extreme case of hame'are be'atzmo is a fundamental idea that one is going to be pater if they are meshamesh meis be'arayos. Ulamanda omar chayev, hacha mechayev tarte. But according to the shita that says that if one were to do an iser of arayos be'aver meis when the anatomy is flaccid, that you're still chayiv. Hacha mechayiv tarte. If a person were to be me'ara himself, then he'd violate two isurim. Mechayiv ashochev u'mechayiv anishkav. He's both. He's both. He was the shochev because it's his aver tashmish, and he's the nishkav because it was himself that he applied it to. Okay, let's change the imagery. Says the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down, Bo mineme Rav Sheshes. Oved kochavim haba al habehema mao. What's the din about a non-Jew who violates the iser of shochevim behema? Do we say takala v'kalon ba'inan, that in order for us to reach the threshold of the iser of shochevim behema, we have two features. It needs to be takala, that the animal caused it, v'kalon, and there needs to be busha by the person, by the oved kochavim. Well, that's a problem. V'acha takala ika, we know that the takala is there, the animal is still alive, but says the Gemara, kalon leka. But by the goy, either that by the goy, it was so commonplace by then, and we know that this was derech Mitzrayim, right? This was these were ma'asim Mitzrayim. So it could be that by the goy that there's no kalon, or that even if he was kalon, even if he was embarrassed, halacha doesn't register that particular busha. Odilma takala afal pisha ein kalon. Or would we say that in the case of oved kochavim haba al habehema, we don't care about having both features, just the takala, just that the animal's there. Amar of Sheshes Tani Tua, we learned this already. Ma'ilano she'ein ochlen ve'ein shosin ve'ein marichin. When it comes to trees, trees don't consume food or drink, and they don't smell. Amra Torah hashches sarv v'chalei. They need to be destroyed. Ho'olu va'adam takala al yadan. Just because there's a person who caused a problem. All the more so, a person who causes problems to others, of course they're going to be chayav misa, which is an answer to our question that the oved kochavim abal abhem is going to be chayav. Says the Gemara, Elamayata, if that's true, oved kochavim amishtach lebehemto. Let's say that there is an oved kochavim who bows down to his behema. Tis sar umiktala. We should say that there's an isser going on here and he should be killed. It says the Gemara, can't be. Why not? Mi kamidi dili Yisrael lo asar ula oved kochavim asar. Could it be that if there's a person who bows down to an animal, that there wouldn't be an isser, but for an oved kochavim there would be an isser? Normally the yid has more stringencies than the goy. There are very rare exceptions to this. Yisrael gufe lissar mididahabi arabia, says the Gemara. Wait 1 second. When it comes to a Yisrael dealing with the isser of the behema, hold on 1 second. There is Ravia here. He was involved in this. What do you mean? How can you say that the Jew is lo asar? So Amar Abai, is that klona merubav? Is that klona what? It depends on what level of busha there is. So Rashi over here explains what's going on. Rashi's 8 lines from the bottom. Amar Abai, is that klona meruba? Sheyeshkan kalon sha'abar al mitzvahs kona v'kalon shegina atzmo b'davar maguna. One is that the yid violated the Ratzon Hashem, and he also did something that's disgusting. He holds that you need both of them for him to be chai. So that's what the Gemara says is a possible approach over here. Where are we? There we go. So that shows us that maybe perhaps we should say that the oved kochavim is chayv miso, and maybe the animal is too. So says the Gemara, we're not talking about the person, but we're only talking about the animal. In regards to a goy who sleeps with an animal, the chas rachmana alayhu, he holds that there is a chas that we have to say in regards to this person. One more answer, and then we're going to have to stop at the bottom of Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Rava Amar Amrator Behema Nenes Me Avera Tehare, that any animal that benefits from an Avera should be killed. Trees don't have hanav. Amrator Ashche Saraf Echale. The trees do get destroyed when they're part of Avodah Zarah, or whatever the case may be. Says the Gemara, you're right. That when it comes to Baalei Chayim, So then we have a little bit more rachmanas on an animal. And if a goy were to be shochev in behema, we wouldn't kill the animal. We'll stop right here at the Tashma at the bottom of the Nehemot Aleph. I'm not sure if I'll be here tomorrow night because I have a board meeting. And if not, I'm going to ask someone to sub. I'll keep you posted. Wishing you all a beautiful night.